Today, we're diving into an event that didn't just change maps on a wall. It shattered entire empires and completely reshaped the 20th century. We're talking about World War I. We're going to look at the single gunshot that set a continent on fire, the brutal new kind of war it created, and the messy peace that, well, you could argue just set the stage for something even worse.
You know, that quote just nails the feeling in Europe back in 1914. It was like the whole continent was holding its breath. For years, you had all this tension building up. Fierce nationalism, countries scrambling for colonies, a crazy arms race, and underneath it all was this tangled web of secret alliances. Basically, you had Germany and Austria-Hungary on one side, and France, Britain, and Russia on the other. Everyone was just coiled like a spring, and they all knew it wouldn't take a massive earthquake to bring the whole house down. Just one tiny spark.
And that spark? It was lit on a sunny morning in a city called Sarajevo. What happened there wasn't just a political murder. It was the trigger for a chain reaction that would pull millions and millions of people into a global catastrophe.
History is just full of these moments of bizarre, unbelievable luck or unluck depending on how you see it. So get this, the first assassination attempt totally fails. A guy throws a bomb, but the Archduke actually knocks it away and it blows up behind his car. He's fine. The motorcade speeds off, but then, and this is the crazy part, Ferdinand decides he wants to go visit the men who were injured in the hospital. His driver doesn't know the new route, takes a wrong turn, and has to stop the car right in front of another assassin, Gavrilo Princip, who's just standing there thinking he'd missed his chance. Princip can't believe it. He raises his pistol, fires twice, and in that one instant, the fate of the world changes forever. Okay, so the news of the assassination just explodes across Europe. Austria-Hungary is furious, obviously, and they send this incredibly harsh list of demands to Serbia. But Serbia, feeling pretty confident because they know their powerful ally Russia has their back, basically says, no way. They refuse to accept all the demands. And so the standoff begins, with the whole world just watching and waiting to see who's going to blink first.
And this, right here, is where that house of cards starts to come crashing down. This argument between Austria-Hungary and Serbia doesn't stay local for long. Because of that messy web of alliances we talked about, a small regional crisis is about to spiral into a global war. The first domino is about to get pushed over.
And the speed of it all is just terrifying. On July 28th, Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia. So Russia starts mobilizing its massive army to defend Serbia. Germany, who's allied with Austria-Hungary, sees this and declares war on Russia. Then Germany, knowing France is Russia's ally, declares war on them too, and decides to invade France by marching through neutral Belgium. While that's the last straw for Great Britain, who had promised to protect Belgium. They declare war on Germany. And just like that, in the span of about a week, all the major powers in Europe are at war.
You know, most of the soldiers who marched off that summer really believed they'd be home by Christmas. They had absolutely no idea they were walking into a new kind of hell on earth. They were walking into the age of trench warfare.
Yeah, any romantic ideas about war pretty much died in the mud of the Western Front. This was a war fought from deep, filthy trenches that stretched for hundreds of miles. Soldiers lived in these disgusting conditions for months at a time, sharing their space with rats, lice, and the constant smell of death. Life just became this brutal, terrifying cycle. You'd get pounded by artillery for hours, and then you'd have to climb over the top of your trench and run straight into machine gun fire, just to maybe gain a few feet of useless, bombed-out land.
And the thing that made it all so incredibly deadly was the new technology. This was industrial-scale killing. Machine guns could now mow down hundreds of men in just minutes. Giant artillery cannons could turn entire landscapes and people into dust. And for the first time, armies unleashed this truly horrifying weapon, poison gas. It was this silent chemical killer that would drift across the battlefield and choke the life out of you. It was a new kind of hell, where old-fashioned tactics met modern killing machines.
The physical toll of this war was obviously immense, but the mental damage was just as bad. I mean, can you imagine living under that constant fear and stress? Men's minds just broke. They called it shell shock back then. It was this deep psychological wound, a trauma that haunted countless soldiers for the rest of their lives.
If you want one battle that sums up the pure, pointless horror of this war, look at Verdun. In 1916, the German plan wasn't even to capture territory. Their strategy was literally to bleed the French white. They attacked a place they knew France would defend no matter the cost, with the simple goal of killing so many French soldiers that the country would be forced to surrender. For 10 solid months, it was just a relentless meat grinder. And the result? Over 600,000 casualties, and the front line barely moved an inch.
Now, while we've been focused on Europe, we have to remember this was a world war. Empires were pulling in millions of colonial soldiers from places like India, Africa, and the Caribbean to go fight and die in France. There were battles in the deserts of the Middle East, in Africa, on the high seas, but by 1917, everyone was just exhausted. The war had ground to a bloody stalemate, and it felt like something, somewhere, had to give.
So just to recap who was fighting who, you had the Central Powers, which was mainly Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. And they were up against the Allied powers, led by France, Great Britain, and Russia. For 3 long years, they basically fought each other to a standstill. But in 1917, the whole equation was about to change big time.
In April of 1917, the United States declared war on Germany. And this was the turning point. For the totally exhausted Allies, America's entry was like a massive shot in the arm. Suddenly there were fresh troops, incredible industrial power, and a huge boost in morale. For the Germans, it was a disaster. They were now facing an enemy with what seemed like limitless resources, and the clock was officially ticking.
The final year, 1918, was really the end game. With all the new American forces, the Allies launched this huge counteroffensive that finally, after 4 years, broke the German lines. The Central Powers just started to crumble from the inside. Austria-Hungary surrendered in October, leaving Germany all alone. With defeat on the battlefield and revolution brewing at home, the German government had no other choice. They asked for an armistice. And so, at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, the guns on the Western Front finally fell silent.
But the end of the fighting was nowhere near the end of the story. Now the world had to somehow pick up the pieces and face the unbelievable cost of what they had called the war to end all wars. 9 million. That's how many soldiers were killed. An entire generation of young men just wiped out.
And on top of that, you have another 10 million civilians who died from disease, from starvation, from the destruction of the war.
So you add it all up, 20 million dead. It's a number so huge it's hard to even comprehend. That's millions of families, millions of communities, just shattered forever.
And the war didn't just destroy lives. It destroyed entire empires that had been around for centuries. The whole political map of Europe and the Middle East was completely redrawn. The German Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Russian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, all of them were gone. And in their place, a whole bunch of new countries and new problems popped up.
So, the victorious Allies get together to hammer out a peace deal, the Treaty of Versailles. It was supposed to create a lasting peace. But what it ended up doing, mostly because France was desperate for revenge and security, was place all the blame for the war squarely on Germany. It forced them to pay crippling amounts of money and basically dismantled their military. It left a legacy of total humiliation and deep, deep resentment in Germany.
And that really leads us to the most troubling question of the entire war. Instead of healing the world, did the Treaty of Versailles just sow the seeds for the next, even deadlier conflict? The bitterness and economic chaos it created in Germany was the perfect breeding ground for radicalism and the rise of the Nazis. So, was the war to end all wars really just a 20-year ceasefire? That's the question World War I leaves us with, a question whose answer would change the world all over.